All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thanks for joining us for the 16th technical working group meeting for the Broward Safety Action Plan. We appreciate everyone who's been able to join us for this journey. Unfortunately, today is going to be the last technical working group meeting, but September we're going to have a joint technical work group oversight committee meeting to decide how this committee is going to be formed and how often they're going to meet moving forward. So we'll talk about that very slightly at the very end. But with that, I hope everyone can see the presentation on their screens over here in the boardroom. If you're not, just click on presentation. Again, if you want to speak, please click on the screen with your finger to turn on the mic. And the participants we have online are Ken Reinhardt, Paula Scott, Rachel Solomon, Sasha Bovello, and Tracy from FDOT. And if anyone's online and they would like to speak at any given time, please raise your hand and I will give you permission. So go to the next slide. Oh. All right, so the four agenda items today are going to be the BSAT benefit, the cost analysis tool, which Brian Gill from WSP is going to go over, and then Christine's going to go over the 11 priority corridors overview, the quick build guide preview, and the 1,000 little things update. So with that, Brian, you're up.
Thanks so much, Fazal. So I'm Brian Keel. I'm with our economic analysis team at WSP. I'm based in New York. I've been with the team for about 8 years or so. And really for probably about the past 5 years, benefit cost analyses, supporting federal grants and other processes has been a huge part of what we've been doing. And so it's been really exciting over the past probably about 6 months to develop a tool slightly different from what we would usually do for federal grants, which has a pretty complex guidance, but one that's really, I think, to help decision making and then ultimately give a sense for what the benefits could be focused on safety for the BSAT project. So, and please, we'll save time for questions, but if there's anything pressing, definitely don't want anyone to get too confused. I'll try to keep it high level, and then if we can, get into the more of the details, I'm more than happy to. But typically, benefit cost analysis, sometimes you'll see cost benefit analysis, so BCA, CBA, usually the same thing. What we're trying to do is we're trying to compare the actual full total cost of a project, everything from design, construction, right-of-way acquisition if needed, as well as the operations and maintenance over a given lifetime against what, and obviously those are in monetized terms, compare that to benefits that the project might bring, trying to monetize those benefits. And when it comes to safety, really, exclusively, we're trying to take a value of a type of crash and then look at how we're avoiding those crashes with the countermeasures that we're putting in. So it's a quantitative tool that's looking at specific changes that the builds might bring in. So if you're doing, any sort of environmental documentation, a no action versus a with action, we're trying to look at what are those benefits that the with action project might bring in, and then actually compare, once we monetize those benefits, how that compares against the cost. And so there's a few key metrics, but one of the big ones that we'll be looking at is typically something called the benefit cost ratio. How do the benefits stack up against the costs? And if it's above 1, typically what we're stating is that the project's benefits outweigh the costs and the project is cost effective. As I mentioned before, this is something that has been really important for the federal grants that have been coming out through the discretionary grant programs. But lots of agencies have guidance. USDOT has guidance. FDOT has guidance. There could be guidance from outside of transportation realms. But benefits will, again, with safety, are looking at specifically reduction in crashes, but could look at a range of other variables that we've considered within this project, but really just try to focus on the safety for our corridors. So when we're thinking about the safe system approach, which it's for my involvement has really been sort of the piece that we've been trying to make our numbers try and make the story for. How can we quantify what a safe system approach is looking at? What we're trying to do is actually see what is the benefit when we're combining these different countermeasures as opposed to just looking at them individually. And we're using these crash modification factors, which are set up by DOT. I think FDOT also has um, a database for crash modification factors, but effectively these are studies of these countermeasures that we're looking at that's actually then putting in a factor for different types of crashes and how well a countermeasure might reduce them. So they're typically academic studies, things that, transportation institutes at universities are studying, and then putting this out into the realm for actually practitioners to then implement within their projects. And so to actually look at the safe system approach, we're actually trying to look at how can we come up with a crash modification factor that's combined for our corridors. So we can actually say, okay, we know that there's X amount of crashes at night and certain types of projects can reduce that versus maybe an intersection crash, which is happening during the day. And we use a different crash modification factor from that countermeasure. Again, just talking about sort of the BCA guidance, and one of the things that we're just like trying to think about is how BCA guidance has been used in the past, especially for safety projects. And typically, one of the reasons why BCAs are required is because there's limited funds. We can't just fund anything that is coming up, and so we're trying to use the quantify tool to assess which of these projects might have the largest benefit. A lot of the guidance typically realizes that some benefits are just really hard to quantify. And so few agencies, I think, are actually then strictly looking at a BCA and its results to say, okay, if you had a BCA of 10.0, that automatically gets the funding. But its use, I think, is pretty varied. What you see across, whether it's FDOT guidance or USDOT guidance, though, is that they are usually coming down to the same methodologies for quantifying the benefits. So as you'll see when we used our tool here, some of our inputs come from USDOT assumptions that come from their guidance. Others are coming from FDOT. We thought that was right to, if we have things like the value of statistical life when we avoid a crash, we want to take that from a local perspective. USDOT one is a national level. That's including crashes of equal importance in Montana and Florida. We have these numbers from FDOT, so we're trying to use that versus numbers that might be more specific from USDOT. So everything from if we were to look at like savings of the value of time, that's something that we're usually using the guidance that are coming from the federal government, but we can use inputs from both the feds as well as FDOT, because typically the methodologies for calculating those benefits are similar. So going back to the main benefit for us at hand, how we're reducing crashes within these corridors. What we're taking a look at is federal guidance gives us more or less a few different methodologies to combine multiple CMFs. There could be some really, really conservative way, especially if we know that one countermeasure is the most dominant, is you really just maybe look at that CMF and then you just say the other ones are, it might not be reducing it. And so you're saying, okay, we're just taking a countermeasure one that could be reducing crashes by, let's say, 50%. It's really conservative because you're just not taking into account the safe system approach. So we didn't really want to use that. But we did want to think about what it looks like when we combine these things without just multiplying the benefits. So here's an example. If you look at your sheet where the value that the method that we came down on was the dominant, common, and residuals method. Pretty much what this does is, I think FDOT says one way you can do this is to just multiply the two CMFs together. So if you have a CMF of 0.8, which means you're reducing crashes by 20%, or 80% of those crashes are, you would reduce crashes by 80%. And one that has a CMF of 0.9, was it? Yeah, sorry. And then if it's 0.9, where you're reducing probably 1%, the way you would do this multiplied is you would multiply them together, 0.8 times 0.9, for a combined method of 0.72. That, I think, is a little too aggressive. And again, our goal is to be as conservative as we can within so we can actually feel that we are not being too, give too much to the benefit of the doubt. We want to make sure that, our quantifying methods still have some conservativeness approach with them. So we use the approach that the OCT recommends called the dominant common residuals method, where we then take that multiplied value, but then limit it to the power of your strongest CMF. And so you can see the numbers and how that sort of methodology works. What it does is instead of having this combined effect of 0.72 by simply multiplying it, you would have a combined effect of 0.77. So you're saying that we have a combined benefit to get that safe system approach, but it's not trying to say these things are working individually. Combined, there's going to be some redundancies in the crashes that we might be limiting, and this approach combines it. So I think we think that this is one, the guidance allows us to do it, and it's a conservative approach as well. So now that we know sort of the main methodology for how we're going to quantify the reduction in crashes, we're just going to try and take a look at what the tool's doing. So this is the tool that we designed, and we'll go through each of these pieces, is really designed so that practitioners, you all, can be able to plug in your project and with minimal inputs, really things that have to do with the cost of the construction, identifying which countermeasures we're using, and then looking at safety data that you can upload into the tool. The tool should then be able to spit out the key values that we're looking at. It's doing the calculations internally within the Excel tool, and then it'll throw you specifically into the output table where we're going to get those main outputs like the benefit cost ratio, net present value, how many years it will take for the project to pay back its benefits relative to its costs, and a few other sort of metrics that might come out of it. So I'm going to not spend too much time on some of these things, but like, as I said, those main user inputs that we have are things that you as the tool user would be inputting in. So you need to know the total construction cost. And as you can see in sort of small text, you would also be trying to put that in by year. So if it's a 3-year construction, put that in. It's important to kind of try to get the years split because of the discounting nature of the tool. We're not just saying that there could be $10 million of benefits each year. We have to discount that benefits in the future might not have the same monetized value as benefits today. And so the tool, as a standard, is using discounting approaches. So we always want to make sure the years that we have are correct. You put in the construction costs here as well as right of way and try to make sure that those costs are as in total as possible. You can also put in O&M costs, but our tool also calculates operation maintenance costs by using, I think it's about a 2% value or a 1% value of the total construction cost per year as an input. So if you don't know what the O&M will be, which I know can be sometimes a difficult piece here, that's something that we can just, the tool assumes, as well as design if we don't really know, which would just be 10% of, it's either 10 or 20% of those construction costs. Then the big piece that we would be putting in would be our crash inputs. And as you can see, one of the things, this is probably as a user, one of the things that would take the longest amount of time to try and input, because one of the things that our tool is doing is, as my example before, crashes at night could be reduced if we had better lights, but not all crashes on a roadway are happening at night. And so we might have a CMF that's related to those lights, but it shouldn't apply to every single crash. And so the important thing here is that we actually, when we're putting in our crash data, you can put as many years as you might have. It's set to about 5 years, I think, within the main function, but that can be changed. But looking at the crash data across that corridor that has these sort of stratified by the severity of the crash using the typical sort of cab code breakdown, as well as its location, whether it's on an intersection or on the main line of a roadway, the crash type, meaning whether it involved a cyclist, a pedestrian, or just a vehicle, and then its time of day. So these sort of categories are important for us to stratify within these things, because crashes then are the CMS that we have loaded in are categorized for each of these types of crashes. So that, adding the lights would only apply to those crashes that would happen at night. The CMFs that come from the clearinghouse that we're using, our database, they tell us which of these crashes are applicable, and that's why we have this breakdown. And so I think it would take some time to make sure we're getting that data right. Using things like pivot tools are really simple, and the tool set up to be able to do that coming from f.data. But this is definitely the piece I think probably it takes the most time as user input, but make sure that we're applying the CMFs accurately. And so this is just an example of how, we use sort of a pivot table to do this for, I think it was the Northwest 19th Street corridor, where we're actually getting the crash data between 2019 and 2023. We have the different types of crashes um, blocked off just for simplicity is the other information that's coming from these crashes. But this is how we would be splitting it from sort of the database of FDOT of crashes we're getting from, I think it's from FDOT. I apologize if it's, oh, yes, thank you. So this is just our list of countermeasures that we have. This is the number of corridors. So again, these are things that were just input into the tool. So, we did the research on which CMFs are applicable, but the countermeasures, of course, are coming from the BSAT program itself. We're not really sort of doing any design side on the economics tool. We're simply just trying to translate what are the countermeasures that are being recommended, what are the appropriate CMFs if available, and then making sure that when we select a project and you select the countermeasures applicable, the right crash modification factor CMF comes up. So again, it's small on the screen for me, but as you can see here, this is sort of a screenshot that's coming from the tool. So in the input section, you would just simply have the list of up to 5 countermeasures that you would have. You can see they're all sort of within that drop-down box. And when you fill that out, as you can see then on the bottom, it then populates all the information for the crash severity, crash group mode, and you're inputting the crash data, but if you're saying it has this countermeasure, it'll know which of your crashes can you actually find benefit from in the build. It's just an example of how we apply this and I'll go through this really, really quickly because I think it's a bit redundant, but how we applied this for the Northwest 19th Street corridor. This was the list of the different types of countermeasures that we had that had an applicable CMF. And so the way the tool would work is it simply looks at if a project just has one type of, or if a crash identified just hits one of these CMFs, you would just apply that. So if any crash that was at an intersection but wouldn't have had any other benefits, would receive a benefit from the retroflective signal backplates. But then as we add crashes, that's when we do that sort of multiplying while limiting it to the power. And this is how you start to then add in the different crashes to get this combined CMF for that corridor, or really for that type of crash if applicable. So then this is sort of, I think at a high level, how we are really applying these crashes, just to kind of then go into how we can take, a project that's designed into monetized values. So we're taking here some of the key inputs that we have, things like, these are all things that you're not inputting that are already set within the project. You would identify maybe the opening year, but its operating period, typically we're using 20 years. Number of crashes is coming from the crash data. All these things like the value of a reduced crash are coming from sources like FDOT or US DOT. You would have your costs. This is where we're actually starting to get our values. And so when you calculate these benefits for that Northwest 19th Street project, you're starting to see, the actual annualized reduction in crashes. So over the course of, an annualized period, 12 crashes, 12 no injury crashes reduced, about 4 possible injuries, less than 1 killed or incapacitated, because again, this is just taking a 5-year average of crashes and then multiplying that against the CMF. But when you take the 20-year period, that's when you really start to see the total number of crashes that are happening, that are being reduced rather. And so you're reducing about 2 killed crashes, 3 serious injury ones, 40 known minor injury ones, then up to over 200. And this is just for one of our corridors that we calculated. So the tool, once you put in the CMFs in your crash data, the tool is doing all this math on the backside to actually then produce the number of benefits that are being shown here. And really, I think that bottom table is one of those key sort of output tables that we're looking at. When we're taking a total look at the benefits, what are the total undiscounted benefits, which means we're now applying the discount rate that I talked about before. And then, of course, some of the other benefits that we have to consider, things like changes in O&M costs. So there usually will be an increase in O&M, but sometimes if we're actually reducing the number of crashes, we're reducing the cost of responding to those crashes. And so sometimes if you're really reducing a large number of crashes, we could see a reduction in O&M as well. But really, to me, I think the big number that you look like here is that benefit cost ratio. So a project like this, we're actually seeing these benefits far outweigh the costs, gets you to about a benefit cost ratio of 1.7, meaning by implementing this project, you're generating more or less value of about $9 million above the total cost of that project. Some limitations here that I think are important for us to think about. One, I think, is that when we look at our list of all countermeasures, not all of those countermeasures, unfortunately, have applied CMFs. So I think it's important to know that they're, this tool might not be as applicable if all of a sudden the countermeasures you want to apply don't actually have a studied CMF. There could be ways to counteract this, just like more research into whether there's sort of like informal reduction numbers that have been estimated. Typically, CMFs are something that's been really well studied, peer reviewed, that have an agreed amount of what that factor might be. And so sometimes you just have countermeasures that are not there. What this means is that if you have a project that has some countermeasures you want to apply, but might not actually have a CMF and your project is still going above one, you're really showing a project that, could have lots of benefits, and just the analysis is not showing all those benefits are. It's being more conservative. Um, we also know that I think, some of these CMFs, again, are something at a national level that we're using. They might have, a varying degree of applicability in our area. We try to be as specific as we can about using like urban arterials or suburban arterials within our projects. Sometimes, though, the CMF is based on rural, urban, lots of projects of all sizes. And that could be a limiting factor about its applicability. The CMF is still published, and that's why we're using it, and says it's available to use for a corridor that might be in Broward County. But there might be some limitations on its applicability, sort of CMF to CMF. And we also know that the crash data really obviously is going to be a big key here. Our crash data that we've been using for our CMFs is between 2019 and 2023. I think, this is pre-COVID, post-COVID, I think is representative. But one thing we know, especially with fatalities, is an area might just not have had a fatality in a while. If that's not, but could be an area that is prone to that in the long run. We can try and, you can try and extend the amount of years that are going in the data, but sometimes just, limitations with your data. I think those are things that would be the most impactful to changing that metric. I think, some less impactful is, if you want to try and use older data, you can. You just have to make sure that we're limited by 10 years. It just other things that might have changed in those 10 years that might mean data that's being used in 2015 is less applicable. So for instance, if, we're using crash data from 2015, there's been no change on that roadway, but we know 3 blocks down, there has been a really good street change. There's just less pedestrians traveling. Maybe the CMF is less applicable for that area because there might be less, pedestrian use of that roadway. And then I think some model limitations for other benefits. This is things that we certainly could be adding, benefits of like mode shift. If people are walking more, there could be some safety benefits that come from there. We're typically not looking at that. We're just looking at the value of reducing the crashes that we know about and not making any sort of blanket future statement about what could be the safety analysis outside of that data. But I hope this has been sort of a high level view about how this tool is going to be useful to sort of evaluate our projects. It's not a tool that I think would all of a sudden you could just submit to the feds for funding, but I think would be a really good idea. Which of these projects might be the most competitive when it comes to seeking funds in the future or just prioritizing for project purpose. Thanks, guys. Definitely, if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's a minor thing. When you were showing the actual crash modification factors for certain strategies, you were going pretty quick.
Yeah.
I thought I saw decreased turn curb radius that had 1.18. Like that has a it makes accidents go up?
Yeah, so it's one thing that I personally struggle with. It's an issue of, I think, the way these things were studied and sometimes the roads not being totally applicable. Um, because I try to be conservative in my approaches, try to be consistent. If we have a countermeasure that has a positive number shown, I want to include that because I don't want to be handpicking just the right CMFs that are being applicable. It is typically being applied, and one of the things though is, one of the things I think is probably up to, the design team is that CMF might not be chasing the best CMF might not actually be the best design choice if we know that project from more local I guess sources or just seeing it on our streets shows that that should be included. I try to do it for the purposes of the analysis, but you're right. It's sometimes there are CMFs that would show an increase in crashes. Um, and I just, to be consistent with the analysis and to be conservative and not handpick, I don't think that should be though a commentary on whether that sort of countermeasure should just be applied because I think there's other less quantified but more anecdotal reasons why these things have benefits for our streets.
Yeah, and not all countermeasures that we propose have CMFs associated with them either, right? Because it's just whatever has been studied in a particular location, from my understanding. Also, we also understand that the Highway Safety Manual is supposed to come up with an update by the end of this year. So we're also able to piggyback on some of those CMFs that potentially might come out with the HSM update. In some situations we may have been using the 2010 CMFs
I think
potentially,
that was
right?
into that.
So some of those things are obviously going to be in flux when we find out by the end of this year. Also, from the FDOT, even CAPCO numbers are pretty antiquated. They're from, I want to say, from the years 2016 to 2019 economic impacts. And there's from some of our conversations with central office, they're going to try to release those on a more annual basis with the Signal 4 system. So they're looking at potentially by the end of this year, potentially releasing more updated crash costs associated with it, which the crash costs now, from 2016 to 2019 or 2016 to 2020 or something like that for that period that they measured. I mean, the economic impact for a fatality was almost 11 million. I'm sure that's increased. I had to make an assumption, but so some of our uh, potentially as part of this or part of another phase, we might potentially look at getting some resources to maybe update the benefit the cost analysis on our corridor projects potentially um, with the new information that will hopefully be released by the end this year, early next year.
Something maybe just piggyback off of that is, it's not to say that our costs, even though our data is coming from different years, we do try to make sure everything's within 2025 terms because that's presumably going to be most accurate to the construction costs that we'd be putting into these tools. So the tool does have sort of an escalation factor built in to make sure that if you identify any value that's coming from a year that's not 2025 or maybe beyond 2025, it can escalate to 2025 terms. So for instance, the FDOT numbers that we show here, we're getting from I'm forgetting which agency at FDOT, but who've put out these numbers. It's based on crashes in 2015 and 2019, and they had escalated 2022 terms. Our tool, even though it's not shown here, actually then uses 2025 terms, but that's just based really on inflation, but not actually real cost. So we make sure that everything is within accurate terms for the purpose of our tool. It's just waiting on real data instead of just general escalation estimates.
So forgive me because this is the first time that I'm seeing this type of calculation. You did a deep dive into how the CMF was calculated, but lost me a little bit in what that is applied to. Are we multiplying that by crash cost? Are we multiplying it by project cost? What if the project implements, let's say from your example, backplates, if we've got a bunch of rear end crashes, is that Is that applicable to that? Is it if we've got a bunch of pedestrian crashes on the same thing and we are implementing black plates, how does that work?
Wow. It's a good question. I think, maybe the best way to look at is these examples that we applied within the Northwest 9th Street corridor, where we're looking at crashes of different categories. So, the way our tool works is when you put in the safety numbers, you're identifying the number of crashes that are, during the day, the severity of the crash, and then the mode. The one thing that we're not doing is we're not looking at the type of crash for vehicular crashes. That could be another limiting factor. So you're right, a rear end crash. If backlights should only be applied to, that type of crash, we might be including crashes of all vehicular types, but we are trying to separate it by at the intersection and then the mode. And a lot of our crashes are typically, really importantly, segmented by vehicular crashes or by or pedestrian and cyclist crashes. And so anything that might have pedestrian or cycling benefits, you'd be multiplying that CMF against the amount of pedestrian crashes that have occurred. So if that's we know the value of it. So let's just, for the simplest purposes of saying we have two CMFs that combined are reducing pedestrian crashes by 50%. And we know that there's one pedestrian fatality that has, a value of $10 million. We're not then adding in those vehicular crashes. We're just reducing that one annualized, assuming it happens, that one annualized crash by 50% for that pedestrian. But I do think it's a fair point about the types of crashes that are happening. Maybe that the type of crash that may be happening like on the main line, whether it's a rear end or something. We're putting all those types of crashes together, and the only segmentation we're doing is whether it's at an intersection, because some types of crashes, some countermeasures would only be applied at the intersection versus ones that would be applied at the main line, and segmenting like by that way. I hope I'm sort of answering your question. I might not be, but we are. I don't know, how do I say this? We are trying to categorize each type of crash and make sure that only the applicable CMFs that would be, to the best of our abilities, that would be applied to that crash would apply. And that's how you would get sort of that combined CMF at the crash level. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
So Lee, when you look at what's on the screen, right? So we separate the crashes by crash severity column, right? And then also, to Brian's point, by intersection, corridor, night, day, mode, right? And then you'd use that multiplier under the CMF. But if you have combined CMFs, like at an intersection, then you get to use the multiplication that he mentioned, where you do multiplied to the power to get the applied CMF on the right. So it's really about like dividing all the crash data into the right buckets, then multiplying it to get the reduction. And at the very end, you take the types of crashes. Is that the next slide? Where's the slide that shows the reduction?
The actual numbers.
There, sorry. So then you have the types of the variable column here, right? With your reduction, we could add another column that said like before, basically, and then after, and you've got them by type. And then you multiply them by the cab code numbers on the previous slide, sorry. The cab code numbers are in the second set of boxes. So no injury crash is 7,700. If you go back to here, the 20,232 times the 7,700 equals the 2.2 million. So then you get an overall savings based on the reduction.
Okay, so the cab code numbers are the average value for each of those different types of crashes. No injury, possible
Yeah,
injury.
so you don't do the dollars until the very end.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sorry. This is new for me too. And sorry, I'm going to preface this by, when we started this contract over a year and a half ago, right, there was a big push to your point about like how federal grants were going to all require BCAs. And so as part of our scope, we said, oh, we need to make sure that we're doing BCAs for all of our corridors. But then kind of the federal requirements have kind of shifted in 2025, right? But we still wanted to give the region this tool of like, how do we have a tool that tries to monetize Ryan's point, like the value of putting in countermeasures. So that's why we kind of created this own unique. The struggle we're having now is if you look at like the bottom table here, we've done one of these for each of the 11 corridors, and our costs, total costs, are based on 2025 FDOT historical costs, project costs, but our CABCO numbers are from 2019, we'll say. Well, as we all know, because we're spending money in 2025, the costs from 2019 to 2025 have gone, let's say, in my world, 50%, it feels like. So we're comparing our crash cost, our benefits from 2019 costs, which I don't know, we'll see in the end of the year, Fossil, what the crash costs are, but that are probably 50% less than what they will be compared to 2025. But we really didn't want to backtrack and bring our project costs down to 2019. Then people would be like, oh, that's not what our projects cost. So we're in this kind of quandary. So we're not, anyway, so that's one discussion we want to bring up today is like, the best case would be to bring the CABCO numbers up to 2025 so we can do apples to apples so that that benefit cost ratio of 1.7 isn't actual, which I'm hoping goes up to show more benefit because the lives saved are going to be worth more divided by the project cost, which stays the same. So then obviously the divisor would be more. So then you would have more benefit to the cost. So anyway, that's where we are.
Did you multiply that by an average inflationary value over that period?
So we have, but we've seen from the federal CABCO numbers that it's actually usually increased significantly higher than like the general escalation rates. So as I mentioned before, we try to make it as apples to apples as possible using this general inflation number. So the actual numbers that you're seeing at the bottom. So if I just click back, we have the numbers that are listed for FDOT here, which were compiled for 2022. We then take this general inflationary rate to try and get them 2025, but I don't think that actually accounts for the real increases that I know the federal government has shown in their updated guidance. Another piece that's changed as well that gets a little technical is just the way we discount these things. I don't, unless people are particularly interested, discounting can be a little complex. But we were using for the past 3 or 4 years, a discount rate closer to about 3%, which was reflecting lower, usually it's aligned with interest rates. And so it was reflecting the lower interest rates that were being accounted for. But most recent federal guidance lifts that to 7%, which always makes it a bit harder to try and show that benefits down the line in, let's say, 20 years, really still have the same value. It's the right way to do this sort of economic analysis to include that discounting and to make decisions based off of that. It just makes it that much harder, though, to actually then show, a benefit cost ratio where the benefits of something 20 years down the line, even though they're steady in real terms, could then be going down once you discount them.
Thank you, Brian. Just a few things I want to point out or maybe raise here. First thing, I believe you developed some kind of tool, probably in Excel, to calculate to perform the BEC assessment. So can you share that Excel file with group? And then maybe in the future, if time allow and resource allow, a training can be held. So everyone know how to use that Excel file well. So that's first recommendation. Second thing, probably not everyone are aware, but the same BC assessment is done for each priority corridors. So all the municipalities that have one priority corridors or at least one priority corridor, you will have this assessment done and included in the priority corridor report. So for some of you, you want to get a little bit more insight, you can also always refer to that report to get some more insight. But I would like to request, or probably too strong, I would like to ask if it's possible to add a description based on the bullet point you show on slide 23 into each priority corridor report as a disclaimer or whatever to justify maybe some of the result coming out from the BC assessment may not 100% meet your expectation. Let me just put it and stop there. So that at least give people the understanding why there is some kind of offset from what you expect to come out, and then what exactly coming out from this study. What is 23? Slide 23.
Yeah, I think it's this, but you mean like that summary table for each project?
No, the next slide. This one, yes.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
presentations. So we are planning on providing that tool at the end of when we go ahead and finalize the corridor reports. So we will be posting the tool. Yes, we're definitely going to need somewhat of an explanation. I know Brian went through this. I know you all can do this. I still can do it. So we're definitely going to need some form of a how-to guide of how to use it and how to input the crash data and stuff so you can get the information that you actually want out of it.
Yeah, and I think it's probably pretty useful just to even, through that example, go through one of these projects and then just see the sensitivities of it. If you were to reduce your crashes by half, how that might actually then take, monetized values, or you just say, okay, if we were to add one additional pedestrian, let's say I found out that on this corridor, there was a pedestrian fatality and I were to add that to the data set. How does that actually change this analysis? The one thing I'll always say is, especially for smaller corridors, where your construction costs are, up to something like $100 million, reducing just the impact of a few fatalities over the course of 20 years can almost always make these projects cost beneficial. That CALCO number of something like 10 million for a crash, if you're reducing, the incidence of a fatality at a quarter by just 10%, that's something that's going to get you something like $1 million undiscounted every year. And so that's something that is, is assuming that you agree with the CMFs and that's something that's being implemented. Those things can be, pretty cost effective. But I definitely open to a training. We try to make the tool pretty much open, that there's a limited number of inputs that a user, whether it's the MPO or towns of the county, can put in. And then hopefully, though we have countermeasures that have been used for our priority corridors, I think it's a tool that probably can just be used for any street project where you have, the costs and what your crash data is.
All right. So since we don't have anyone, Christine, I think you're up, right?
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. All right. So lucky me, you get me for the next 3 items. And I'm going to go through deliverables and how we can basically deliver project safety improvements, long-term, medium-term, and then short-term. So those are the 3 presentations I have. So first, we're going to go through the priority corridors, which really links with what Brian just talked about. Of course, we have the 11 corridors. We have 3 state, 3 county, and 5 city corridors. It equals over about 20 miles, and it captures 10% of our total KSIs just by doing 20 miles of improvements. Each of our corridor reports has 4 chapters, and so I just kind of listed the table appendix here. These were just submitted in June as draft, and so we're kind of currently in review and revision, hoping to finalize next month. So chapter 1 is really like kind of why are we doing this project? Number 2 is really what's the existing conditions and analysis. Chapter 3 is a summary of all the stakeholder coordination that we did, both public meetings, road safety audit, and the stakeholder coordination with our cities and county and state. And then chapter 4 is really the meat of it, is kind of what we propose. And it goes through all the proposed improvements, a cost estimate of that, BCA that we just talked about and kind of how we can tee it up for next steps. So with that, I'm going to run through the 11 corridors really quickly because I'm really proud of the work that we did. So Broward Boulevard, 95 to Northwest First in downtown Fort Lauderdale. We had 25 safety countermeasures proposed, 13 are corridor improvements, 12, another 12 are intersection. And as we talked about, a lot of these, we're trying to use the safe system approach. So redundancy is key. So at intersections, we have a lot of overlap, right? So flashing low turns, raised intersections, kind of putting all those things on top of each other in hopes of getting to 0 fatalities, right? This is our typical section that we proposed. No lane reduction because we have like 70,000 cars on our boulevard in the morning. It's crazy. But widen the sidewalks, kind of reassess the bike lane space into wider sidewalk space to create safer streets. And then the corridor, which is kind of small, I'm sorry, but for each of them, we did a concept that's engineered over an aerial with the right-of-way lines. And you can see all the improvements along the corridor where we aligned like bus stops with crosswalks. This is a good one where we had existing bus stops, but we added some mid-block crossings that are signalized, a lot of raised elements to get people to go the target speed of 30, 35 miles an hour. Obviously, you're in downtown. This reminder, this corridor is on the state's list of top deadliest bike and ped corridors, unfortunately. So really getting those speeds down as you enter downtown is key. Sterling Road is another FDOT corridor. Our corridor was 95 to US 1. On this one, we had 27 safety countermeasures proposed, 16 corridor, 11 intersection improvements. I'm just going to quickly go through these. This one had 2 segments. So from I-95 through the Dania Point development to Bryan Road, you can see the top intersection. So we kept the lanes because we've got those big developments on both sides, north and south. And then as you go east, we were able to repurpose the lane going east to US 1. You've got a residential area and be able to get those protected bike lanes, wide sidewalks with the tree lined. So that's the intent of Sterling. Here's the layout. You can see the interstate on the top left, and then Dania Point, and then that Oakwood Plaza is on the north and south. As you get to Bryan Road, which is that first intersection that's like coral color, it's a raised intersection to kind of enter into the more residential local context. And then through there, you've got the 4 lanes, medians, offset sidewalks, tree-lined streets, raised intersections, raised crosswalks to connect transit. We've got kind of a wonky intersection at the railroad that we were able to tighten up. People are having issues stacking up on the train tracks and not being able to see the signals. So really tightening up that intersection there. And then, yeah, just really tightening everything up and being able to create a safer street. The third FDOT corridor is US 441 from Davie Boulevard north to Sunrise Boulevard. This is Fort Lauderdale on the east, Plantation on the west, and Lauderhill on the north. So we've got 3 cities. On this one, we've got 22 total safety countermeasures proposed, including 12 corridor wide and then another 10 intersection. Within this one, we have kind of 2 cross sections, very similar, keeping all 6 lanes. This corridor has a plan to have Primo transit on it. So we were aware of that. So there hopefully will be a bus priority lane at some point. But widen the sidewalks. The one on the bottom is to take the existing bike lanes and make them into wider sidewalks. So we're able to reprogram that space and then obviously keep the medians and narrow the lanes. And then this one's a little longer, so I've got 2 pages, but the top left is Davie Boulevard, and then you move north to the right. And really trying to add medians where we could to improve safety, add mid-block crossings, raise those crossings, align them with bus transit to try to get the speeds tempered just by trying to narrow everything up and then widen those sidewalks. So unfortunately, not enough space to put in landscape buffer between our sidewalks and our cars, but just trying to squeeze everything down and then get the speeds way down was the main goal here. And it goes all the way up to Sunrise Boulevard. You'll see on that right, the right side of this screen, there's a trail that runs along the south side of Sunrise Boulevard. And so we've included the trail crossing as a proposal there to get people across safely. So then we move into our county corridors. So 31st Avenue is our longest corridor. It's about 5.2 miles from Northwest 8th Place, which is just south of Sunrise Boulevard, to McNabb Road. This touches 5 cities, if I can remember all of them. Fort Lauderdale, Lauderdale Lakes, Tamarack, Lauderhill, and who did I forget? Oakland Park. So, right? I'm looking at Karen. Is that right? So 5 cities. This one got packaged up by Broward County to propose for a Safe Streets for All implementation grant. So very excited about this one moving forward. This is unfortunately the riskiest street to travel on, Broward County Street to travel on currently, but hopefully not for long. We have 26 safety countermeasures proposed, 15 corridor wide, and then another 11 at intersections, of course, trying to get that redundancy at all those locations. Our typical sections, we had several because the right-of-way changed and then the opportunities changed, but basically trying to get really wide sidewalks, especially a consistent wide sidewalk shared use path on the west side of the street as you move north. In some areas, as you can see, we have dedicated bike lanes, so we kept those where they were. And then this one's really long, so I apologize, it's super small because it's 5 miles. And I didn't want to bore you with like 20 sheets. So, but overall, you can see we've laid out all the lanes, mid-block crossings, raised intersections, narrowed the lanes, added trees, and then all the technology. We have a school zone on this one, so proposing adding all the school zone amenities, proposing cameras, the new safety cameras as well. 19th Street is next. 19th Street is also a county corridor. I think my limits are completely wrong. I'm sorry. So the limits on this one are 43rd Terrace all the way to 31st Avenue. The corridor wide improvements, there's 14 and then another 10 intersection for a total of 24. So trying to get improved speeds basically is a big one here. We do have some trucks with some industrial here, so making sure that we're accommodating those turns. But on the 43rd to 441, there's actually an MPO county project that's being constructed right now. So that'll be the cross section you see on the top. And then from 441 east to 31st Avenue, basically we're going to take the shoulders, narrow bike lanes there now. So kind of take that space back and do really wide sidewalks on either side and then narrow everything up. Add trees. So here you can see on the top, the center is your 441 intersection. So we'll take it kind of from there to the east to 31st Avenue, add medians, add trees, raised intersections, raised crosswalks. We've got some speed tables as well. You can see the industrial along the north. So making sure that trucks can make that turning movement. So made sure we didn't block off anything with those medians, but trying to balance everything. All right. West Broward Boulevard is also another county corridor that's in city of Plantation. Limits are Central Park Drive to University Drive. So this is a county corridor. West of University is not state, it's county. And here we have 24 safety countermeasures proposed, 13 corridor, 11 intersection. This corridor is where the county offices are. If you guys have been to Broward County. The cross section is keeping the lanes, but basically narrowing them up. So you've got 10-foot inside, 11-foot outside for transit. And then by kind of squeezing everything together, we can create that space that's separated for bikes and peds. So we've got really a narrow landscape buffer. I think it says 3 feet. And then you can see the bike lane and the sidewalk are there. And trying to fit as many trees as possible to get that enclosure feel. This project, top left is Central Park Drive. You can see Central Park is on the north side there. And then as you go east, Pine Island, and then the mall, Broward Mall, is on the south as you go east on the bottom to University Drive. Again, medians, trees, aligning bus with raised crosswalks, a couple of raised intersections to really get those speeds down, speed radar signs, and then of course all the technology at the intersections. So, all right. So starting with city corridors, Royal Palm Boulevard is in the city of Margate. This project is Riverside to 441. We have 23 safety countermeasures proposed on this corridor, 14 corridor, another 9 intersection. This one is 4 lanes existing, but really, really wide lanes and a very wide median. So we're able to kind of reallocate the space from the median to create 2 landscape buffers on the sides is how we did it. So no new right of way, just taking that space, reallocating the space. So you can see we got protected bike lanes and sidewalks on both sides on the corridor from Riverside to Rock Island. And then when you get to Rock Island going east, there's these frontage roads that exist. So our thought was we'll use the frontage roads that are very low volume as our parallel bike facilities and keep, the bikes and the peds separated, and then just narrow up the street to do some traffic calming. And these are the concepts. So you can see a lot of green is kind of shifting to either side. Right now there's a really wide median. And then here we just did spot improvements. So we just showed the aerial with the spot improvements. So you can see kind of some intersections and some raised crosswalks, some median tips. Rock Island is another corridor in City Margate. Our limits are Southgate Boulevard to Royal Palm. This one has 22 safety countermeasures, similar to Royal Palm. It's a similar suburban context. So 13 corridor, 9 intersection. This one also has that frontage road, as you can see on the top. So you've got kind of this frontage road feel. So kind of putting the bikes there. And then as you move south, the frontage road drops. And so really creating those wide separated spaces for the pedestrians and then narrowing up all the lanes. Speed is really a big deal on Rock Island and Royal Palm. You would think because it's in the suburbs that there would be less people crashing, but there's a lot of crashes here. And the speeding is evident when you're out there. So this one starts at Southgate Boulevard, which is kind of not a square intersection, as you can tell. So making sure the turning movements work for the vehicle types. We tightened up that northbound right turn was kind of a high-speed right. So we put some curvature in it to try to slow that down. And then you can see just north of Southgate Boulevard, there's a canal crossing. So we proposed adding a trail crossing there with a raised crosswalk and a signal there. And then as you move north from there, it's really narrowing up the lanes and then creating really wide shared use paths on both sides. And as you move north, north of 6th Court on the bottom there's this really big swath of green. And we understand that's an FPL easement. And the city has an agreement. So we're able to kind of widen our trail onto that easement, which was really useful. And then this goes all the way up to Royal Palm Boulevard. So it intersects actually with the other project that we did. The next corridor is Sistrunk Boulevard in the city of Fort Lauderdale and partially in Broward County from 27th Avenue to Andrews Avenue. Sistrunk Boulevard, unfortunately, is the riskiest city street in Broward County. So a lot to do here. We proposed 25 safety countermeasures, 14 corridor, 11 intersection. The city and the county have done a lot of work on Sistrunk over the years. So some of these improvements you'll see listed are already there. Wide sidewalks is one of them. They're already there. But I wanted to make sure we were giving you a holistic list, but not trying to take credit. So good job to the city and the county already for doing a lot here, but it's still really risky. So what else can we do? This one's really narrow already. On the west end, which is the county jurisdiction from 27th to like 22nd-ish. It's 4 lanes right now. We kept it 4 lanes, but tried to just squeak the lanes a little tighter so we could widen the sidewalks and try to separate those sidewalks. And then in the city section, 22nd over to Andrews, you've got 3 lanes for most of it. And so really trying to squeeze it again, but it's really tight already. We noticed we went out there, there's 9 and 10-foot lanes already. So really the improvements that are key on this one are going to be the lighting is a huge issue out there. It's really dark at night. They have decorative lighting, and some of the lights have already been retrofitted to have a brighter fixture, but most of them haven't been. So I think that's hopefully an easy immediate fix for us. Also adding some more traffic calming, because hopefully if there is a crash in the future, if speeds are lower, hopefully it won't be fatal, right? So adding raised crosswalks. The city is already proposing 5 new crosswalks on this corridor. I think those are going in maybe as soon as this year. No, soon. Okay. So I'd really love to get this finished. So maybe you can raise them, Karen, wink, wink. So we can get some traffic calming and then maybe raise some intersections. One thing, we had both of our public meetings at the YMCA that's right in the middle of the corridor. And that's really a community center. And you've got a lot of people walking to that center, but yet there's really no intersection control at that intersection where people are coming from the south to get to the YMCA on the north. And so we proposed kind of a tabletop speed table for the length of the face of the YMCA. So it's like a shared street in front of the YMCA. So it's traffic calming and pedestrian safety there. So a lot of improvements proposed on this one, but we were scratching our heads because it's already narrow, right? It only has a few lanes right now. So really, how do we add more safety and get creative on this one? So lighting will be key, and safety, safe speeds will be key on this one. Southwest 10th Street is a corridor in Deerfield Beach. This one is a city corridor east of I-95 over to Dixie Highway. This one we proposed 22 safety countermeasures, 15 corridor, 7 intersection, and this one we actually proposed roundabouts. So I'm really excited that we got to do something a little bit different on this one. This one also is 6 lanes east of the interstate, but the volumes showed that they would warrant a repurposing to 4. So we gave them an opportunity to reallocate that space to create protected bike and ped opportunities with tree-lined corridors on both sides. And then this is the beautiful roundabouts. So west of here, I'm sure all of you know, we have the Southwest 10th Interchange Expressway project. And that'll tie in right at where it says begin project. And the good news is that the engineer who designed this project is also leading that project. So hopefully we'll get some, what do we say? Some synchronization between the two, because he's, yes, being thoughtful of like what to design there. But the intent there is they're going to do a 4-lane like local street on Southwest 10th west of here. And then the expressway functions will be separate. So those 4 lanes will tie right into these 4 lanes was the intent. So giving the city an opportunity to redesign it. And then we did preliminary lane repurposing analysis. And then we also did preliminary roundabout analysis too, to justify these. And then we were able to get creative with the geometry to fit it within the right of way. So really excited about this one. This one was also packaged as part of an SS4A implementation grant to USDOT. So fingers crossed we get both. Taft Street is next in the city of Hollywood. The project limits are 70th Terrace to US 441. This one has 23 safety countermeasures proposed, 12 corridor, 11 intersection. This one, we had entertained a lane repurposing and then met with the politicians, and they were kind of on the fence to move forward on that. We had like some for, some against. So we kept the 4 lanes to proceed in the corridor report. So really about slowing speeds, adding medians was a big push from the city because access management was kind of a mess here with the commercial on the north. And then aligning our crosswalks with our bus infrastructure and then raising those crosswalks. So trying to create space for pedestrians to cross safely. This area has a a lot of like working class families, and then you've got all the commercial on the north, and then you've got schools on the south. So a lot of people wanting to be able to just walk across the street instead of having to drive. That was the need that we heard at the public meetings. Oh, and here's our typical section. So at the top is the proposed 4-lane, and then I snuck in the 2-lane scenario. Sorry, Rick. Yeah, he was very supportive, so thank you to the commissioner. All right, so I got through 11 corridors in a few minutes. Next steps, as I said, we're updating these corridor reports right now. I'm hoping to submit those final next month. And then Fazil and James are going to take this to the MTP to integrate those for programming in November. So they'll be reaching out to all the cities to get your resolution of support. Is that the right word?
That is correct.
Okay. So they'll be calling you.
Yeah, so something else regarding these concepts. These are not the final concepts. Those are concepts from our second round of reviews. So those concepts are going to be the consultant team is starting to work on finalizing them. We will be bringing these concepts to the September meeting. We're gonna kind of have like an open house, so you all can actually see it rather than trying to squint your eyes and try to find it on the screen. We're also going to have all this information also posted on our website. And for some of the corridors that we decided to move forward with, even through our MTP process, there are some roadways, regardless of how you want to do your prioritization, or if you do different types of prioritization, that still bubble up to the top. Like Sistrunk was one of them. Sistrunk has consistently been a road of concern that's had a lot of severe crashes. I think 31st Avenue on different types of prioritization situations have also been very high up there in terms of severe crashes. So it's kind of interesting how through this process that we saw some similarities with some of the analysis that's been done in the past. And then now we're going to quiz you all on how many safety countermeasures is on Taft Street. Does anyone remember? No? Oh, 24. Okay. I don't even know if that's the right answer.
Close. See, 23. You're almost, she was so close. Yeah.
Exactly. 20 something. So let's just remember that.
Okay. Well, then I need the lane repurposing. Then I can add that. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on if that's all right. Does that work? Okay. So we are creating a quick build design guide as one of the deliverables for this project. The intent is because we need safety now. We don't want to wait 10, 20 years to get all these projects in the ground, right? We want to get projects in now. So what are those tools? And so creating a guide that helps give just some guidance on what's the process, what materials are best practice, and then kind of what's the approval process for those projects. So the guide has about 5 sections in it: introduction, what's the project development process, a materials guide of best practices, and then an evaluation guide of how to evaluate projects if they're successful or not. And then we did an outreach chapter on kind of best practices, but I'm sure you guys know how to do that. Defining quick build was a big question, kind of like what is quick build? So I'll just read this really quick. Quick build projects are built with materials like paint, signs, and pavement markings to implement projects in a shorter time and at a lower cost compared to traditional methods. The design for these projects draws on new nationally recognized standards for safe streets design. And of course, Deerfield Beach is highlighted right there with their quick build project. It also includes some potential outcomes, right? We're looking to increase safety. Number one, we want to make sure that we're inviting public use of our public rights of way, right? Make better use of our public streets. Number three, improve business, right? Walkability. We want people spend money, cars don't spend money, right? So getting people out, improving business. And then number four, improving travel options, right? We want people walking, biking, using transit, and feeling comfortable. So how do we do that? Through quick build methods. We included this about project types just so that you can understand kind of what's quick build compared to like the long-term capital on the right. So really there's demonstration projects, which are like the day where you have like an event and you just do some chalk and you really show people what it could be, maybe have a street fair party or things like that, bike ride, things like that. And then the pilot and interim, kind of similar, but pilot is, I guess, less permanent, and then the interim is more permanent. So really showing that like there's different phases of quick build that you could do to try to test things out. And then different project intents. So there's intersection projects, multimodal projects, traffic calming projects, and then you've got these kind of creative projects that are kind of a one-off of a quick build. And then we did the process. So we did the 6-step process where you need obviously identify the opportunity, you know, what if there's a safety issue, right? People are dying, like there's an opportunity, right? Gather data. What kind of data do you need to support that opportunity, right? Crash data, traffic volumes, all kinds of good stuff. 3, you need to obviously go out. Is it business owners at that corner or that corridor? Is it a neighborhood? Like who do we need to talk to and understand all those issues? And really talk about the idea of getting a quick build project and what that would look like and what that would take. Then you do your concept and you identify kind of what the needs are and do a cost estimate so you can gather the money, because these projects aren't very expensive, but they still take money, which we have to program or find. And then obviously implement the project and not forget that about MOT permitting, which I noted on here. And then we did speak with Broward County about kind of their process. I know a lot of cities have the maintenance agreement with Broward County. So we included a process of kind of what that looks like in the manual. And then of course, an evaluation chapter, making sure that you reminded to take before counts so that you can do after and compare them so that we can make sure that it's worth moving forward or maybe not worth it. So that's why we do quick build. This process shows the Broward County review process. This, of course, is if you're going to have Broward County maintain your markings. And Carmela, please chime in if this is needs to be updated. But basically, you need to develop your project, right? And then you need to submit your formal plans to the county. We were told it takes 3 to 6 weeks for that review. And they would like to see any traffic analysis that you've done or any impacts to traffic signal timing that you need to consider that when you submit, right? So if you're repurposing a lane, we need your traffic analysis so that we can see how we need to retime the signal, right, for that. Then you'll get your comments back and then you'll need to resubmit. And you might have to do that a couple times. I put 2 submittals on here. It might take 3, to be honest, hopefully not more than 3. And then the county will sign off, but then they'll also have you do a maintenance exclusion letter. I'm looking at you to correct me if I'm wrong. So if you're doing, let's say you're doing striping, delineators, and planters, right? The striping might be covered by the maintenance agreement, but like if you do like purple paint, then that won't be covered in the bulb outs, and then the planters aren't covered. So you need to write a letter out that says, you know, the city's responsible for maintaining these items, right? And then the county has to sign off on what they'll maintain. So that's my understanding. Is that right, Carla? Oh, okay. Can you turn on your microphone? Sorry.
Just to add to that, we're revising the traffic engineering agreements, and there is a section in there for pilot projects that could fall on this. All could fall under. So that could help the process on this as well.
Excellent.
All right.
But we'd still need to submit.
Yeah, still submit unless the city wants to take responsibility for maintenance just from the beginning.
Okay.
This is still a draft version on the left, correct, Chris? Okay.
That's draft. And then just to note, number 7, revocable license. I understood that's needed if your project crosses a county right of way. So if you're going to do Sistrunk Boulevard across Avenue of the Arts, right, at 7th Avenue, that's a county corridor, you need to get a revocable license from the county to cross 7th Avenue. So just to note. So this is included, to your point, this is draft. We did get review comments last week. So we're in the process of updating it. Some materials that are included, we've got all types of like 1-day materials kind of on the left with tape and traffic paint, to more permanent materials like thermo on the right. So all different kinds of materials are outlined in there, the cost, the type, and
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We can talk about it after the meeting. I don't know if you want to show this slide
Okay.
because of the colors.
Yeah.
Have you seen the latest memo from USDOT and hence FDOT? We can talk about it after the meeting.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, these pictures are dated. I'm sorry. Other materials, vertical elements. I've got 3 slides for vertical elements. These are more like temporary, like cones, barricades. These are plastic jersey barriers on the bottom here. So really doing those quick, test it out. And then more permanent, like semi-permanent quick. You've got low profile vertical delineation, the wave delineators. Got the delineators of all types on the right there, the planters on the left, bottom left. So all different types of vertical delineation to create the space that you're looking to create. And then you've got all these module elements now. So from speed tables to raised crosswalks, traffic circles, bus stops are all these modular things that are like Legos that you put together. Really cool. So all types of different opportunities to create the project that you need. And then we have a space for other, so stencils and signs and things like that. So the signs that are top right and bottom left are more like the one day, like quick inform, right? They're not standard, but then the bottom right is more like METCD. So you really have to work with kind of what you're needing to propose or transmit to your community. I remember when we did the roundabout at 13th Street, Karen, we put a sandwich board in the middle that said, remember, yield to traffic and circle. Just people just weren't used to it. So even though we had the yield to traffic METCD sign on the yield sign, we added another graph, and it had like a graphic that showed the circulating. So really more education in a temporary way. So. And then really evaluation. So we did an evaluation chapter to say, how well did this project meet your goals? How effective were your materials? Would you use them again? What did we learn? What are your successes? And then we included these 4 chapters that basically are questions related to evaluating safety, and then evaluating public use, and then evaluating business. So these are just questions that you could use. And then improving travel options. So really getting you to think about what data you need before and after, instead of a lot of times we wait until after and then we're like, oh, we should have checked with people before how they felt instead of asking them after only, so that we can compare before and after. So, and you'll notice in here, some of these are quantitative, like, speed counts, tube counts before and after, but then some are qualitative, like talking to people about how they feel. So it's a mixture. So you'll get to decide what's best for your city or your project. And then, of course, community outreach. We want to make sure that we're doing community outreach to build trust, but also inform the community why you're doing it with paint and sticks instead of concrete. I think a lot of people freak out when they're like, paint and sticks, why? But really that information gathering and doing that before, during, and after. We really want to improve the outcome and improve the transparency. And then a lot of people have really good ideas. So that kind of prevents those mistakes in the future. So going out to the community. And then, of course, just a list of kind of all the opportunities, just so that you have a checklist. So that is the quick build guide. Any quick questions? Except for Scott, I'm going to see you after. So thank you. Okay, where are we at time? Oh, we're doing good.
So Eric Power from online has his hand raised, but we're doing pretty good on time. It's a 3:54, so
Yep.
it's 35 minutes. So Eric, so I'm gonna give you permission to speak. If you can unmute yourself, we should be able to hear
Hey,
you.
everybody.
Perfect.
Hi, thanks for letting me call in. It is a little hard to hear you guys, not next to the microphone, so I apologize. Thank you for this quick build presentation. Broward County desperately needs one. I'm just going to be a little cynical in that the time frame for Broward County to review a quick build project, especially additional reviews and legal and meetings, it's not quick. And I think we have to be honest with what the definition of quick might mean to a transportation engineer or planner, and to what it might mean to a resident. I would prefer that we try to rename this to temporary improvements or something else of that nature. unless Broward County really can determine a way to truly make something like this quick. I think we should change the name of this. Thank you.
Can we talk about how long it takes, Carmelo? Realistically?
Realistically, plan reviews, like you said, are 3 to 6 weeks, depending on the plans.
Okay.
If the city's going to maintain the markings themselves and opt out, it's all the city process.
Mhm.
An RLA takes about 3 to 4 months. So as soon as it's set in place, the RLA, it can be used for any other city. We just need that, it's the initial template that has to be set in place. That first one might take a little bit longer, but after that, if we work on something now, then any future quick build projects could be a little bit more expedited, but they do have to go to city commission.
In the review process, I would assume at least 2 submittals, because you've got an initial and then do
It
comments.
depends on the size of the project too, so. Yeah, I mean, if you're
Okay.
gonna submit, like a 31st Avenue project as a quick build, which is unrealistic.
Right.
It's gonna be a little bit harder, but I mean, if you, like the 3rd Avenue that we did that we helped out with in Deerfield, that was quick.
Mhm.
I mean, they were done, like the whole thing was done in less than 4 months. Between review and implementation, and our staff helped with realigning the roadway. So with all that, so we, like, TD staff ground out all the old pavement markings to help with that implementation. So that's pretty good with the equipment that we have, and realigned it for them before that project was implemented.
I was like 4 months from when to when? 4
I
months
think it was September.
concept to
Oswald, no, yeah.
delivered?
Yeah, because the pavement was painted, the quick build portion that was done by community was over, Faz will remember this, maybe like a weekend. It was a weekend project or 2 weekends.
Yeah, no, so for the Deerfield one, right? The Deerfield one, and Carrie, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was about 4 to 6 months we were doing the planning from us trying to figure out what's the concept gonna look like and everything, and then also aligning that with what Broward County was able to do, also making sure, with the weather, but we got really lucky that we were able to do it. I think we started on a Monday and we ended it on Sunday, while Saturday and Sunday, I think we had some other community members come and join us. I think we even had some for some where some of the schools were, I think some of those children or some of those was it middle schoolers or high schoolers also joined us out there on the Saturday and Sunday. That sounds correct, right, Carrie? When we did the installation in Deerfield?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the story map right now, which gives it on our website, which gives a general timeline of the project. So it says that we started in the summer of 2021 with the public outreach, design in the fall, and then winter was the completion. I believe it was in December. And that was about a week-long implementation schedule.
Yeah, and for that one, we were hoping December would have been nice and cold. It was not. It was still like 95 degrees outside.
And you did community outreach.
Everything, yep.
Yeah.
And then we also took like before counts and we took some after counts. So if you look at the whole cycle, I think we took some counts from right after installation until I want to say 3 or 6 months afterwards. So we had so if you look at the whole thing, I guess it took a year, but the installation I think was relatively relatively quick, especially with the road realignment. It was the first time we were going through the process. And working very closely with the Broward County Traffic Engineering, with the community, with the city of Deerfield. So
Well, I don't think you need to rename it, but I think it could stay as quick build.
Okay.
So I think it can be done. It's just, yeah, like there'll be some heartache in some cases, especially with the RLA, because there's no template right now.
We could include that. Okay. Any other questions on quick build? Oh, okay. Sorry. For Eric. All right, we're gonna move to 1,000 Little Things. So 1,000 Little Things I hinted on last month, but made some progress. So what is 1,000 Little Things, if you weren't here? It's a listing of 1,000 safety implementation project tasks across Broward County that can be accomplished quickly through existing maintenance and operations. So these are things we can do hopefully like right now. We don't have to design anything. We can just do it, right? So I presented a list last time, so this is what I've come up with so far. So we've identified 254 LPI locations. These were identified as part of the BSAP Technology Action Plan and also have at least one pedestrian KSI crash. I also added the priority intersections to this list. This obviously would need to be led by our county traffic engineering department because they oversee our maintenance for all of our signals. But I'm going to give a list to all of our local champions. So if it's in your city, you'll get a list of these locations so that you can just be aware. The next one is bike detection. This one also came out of our technology action plan. This is where we've had bike KSI crashes. Had a couple meetings with the county to talk about kind of how to do this. And basically what they said was if they have the Iteris camera system, which there's a beautiful picture from the internet right here, you can basically add the bike detection zone, which if you look really closely in the picture, there's a B1 on the left in the bike lane. So basically if you're biking in that lane or you can see the B1, that's a bike detection zone. If you are on a bike and you enter that zone, the signal will know that you need a green light. So if only a bike shows up, you'll still get a green light is the intent, right? So I still need to cross-reference the 90 locations with the Iteris locations to make sure that it's possible. So that's left for me to do. Of course, this would be led by traffic engineering with the signal maintenance division, and then I'll get the local municipality their list. Emergency preemption also was listed as a technology improvement. We did a mapping of where we had response times greater than 11 minutes. And then I cross-referenced that with the existing preemption map that we have in the county and came up with the 30 locations. So these are intersections that don't have preemption that have response times greater than 11 minutes. My understanding from talking to the county was that these devices would need to be championed actually by this local fire department. And so if it's in your city, which I'll get you a list, then the fire department would have to go to the county and basically put up the capital to put in these projects and have that coordination. But then the county would maintain it after it's installed. So identified 30 of those. The next one is high visibility crosswalks, 216 individual crosswalks at 74 unique intersections. Are located through our 11 priority corridor projects, plus the 20 high KSI intersections that we identified. These will be obviously given to the jurisdictional owner, FDOT, county, or city. And then if it's like an FDOT corridor, but it's in your city, I'll also give you the list as well. Backplates, super easy. So I'm hoping these can be an easy win. We found 490 locations at 62 intersections. These came from our 11 priority corridor and our top 20 intersections. And these will be part of the maintenance, of course. And as we heard from Brian, there's a proven safety countermeasure reduction with these. And I'm happy to say that many of our intersections have a lot of these. So we're doing a great job putting these in. Great job. Dynamic envelopes. Through our rail safety action plan, we identified 57 crossings that either don't have dynamic envelopes or they're pretty faded. So working with our rail partners and then the crossing jurisdictional owner to identify opportunities for new striping. The next one is the no left turns or no right turns at our train intersections. We found 68 signs at 34 intersections. So one intersection that has them, which I've seen a lot, is Oakland Park and Dixie Highway. Has these signs now. I don't think they say train, but they say no left turns. As you go southbound, no left turn, and then as you come northbound, it says no right turn. So these are really, they're in your face at night, so it's really great. The next one is these bus LED signs that I'm in love with. I put 200. I haven't verified 200, Ramari, but I haven't gotten the GIS file of where they are existing, so that's what I'm waiting for. But I'm thinking we can find at least 200 locations. So I'm hopeful that I'm going to get 200. That's the goal. But BC has funded a program. They've already got 596 in the ground right now, and they've got programming upcoming for 2,000 more over the next 5 years. So I'm going to do an analysis of our HIN corridor with the bus network and then subtract the ones that are already in place so that we can help identify ones on high injury network. And then I just, through all my random Googling, found some extra opportunities. So in-lane speed pavement markings, about 160 of those. I found some pedestrian countdown signals that weren't installed, so we could add those. Turn lane striping. We have a lot of, through our near miss analysis that we did, we found that a lot of people are coming over the stripes when they're turning. And so I really like those dual left, putting the stripes on the inside and the outside. LED fixtures, most of them are updated, but I found a couple that weren't updated, so an opportunity there. A lot of FDOT intersections are putting the nose and then they're putting the delineators in the yellow hatching that goes out into the intersection. And then I've seen where they put yellow delineators out there. So I found a couple of opportunities to put some delineators out to extend those median noses just with a delineator. Refresh stop bars, those were mostly on Sistrunk that I found. And then the turning vehicle stop for pedestrian signs at the intersections. So hopefully those are easy to put up. So what's next? I need to finalize my list. Then I need to clean the list and make sure it's good. And then I'm going to submit it to the partners next month. And then we'll finalize it in September. And then you'll all get a list. And hopefully we'll do 1,000 little things together. So far, good news. My list adds up to 1,267 items. So it's more than 1,000 already. But I still need to clean the list. So we will get there together. But this, of course, gives you hopefully lots of opportunities to do something today, quick build, maybe next year, and then program something in the long term with a priority corridor within hopefully the next 5 years so that we can get to zero together. That's back to Fossil.
All right. I'm assuming no one has any questions on the 1,000 little things, right? No, no? Okay, perfect. Well, it sounds like Broward County Traffic Engineer is going to be busy according to this presentation. But yeah, so for our next meeting, which will be our next and final meeting, not just you all, but then also our oversight committee will be invited to that meeting. So we're going to have this final joint committee meeting. We're going to, like I said before, we're going to do an open house with all of our deliverables. Our consultant team will be present if you have any questions or if you have other ideas about how we can move these projects forward. In between then and now, James and I have been reaching out to many of your municipalities and agencies to talk about how we can try to either fast track the implementation or at least move forward with whatever our next steps are with getting resolutions of support and other types of buy-in. Now, the most important thing, please be here in person on September 10th. We were going to have it the following week, but we found out that there was an APA conference. So we moved it forward. So hopefully you all can be here so we can also do our selection of what that oversight committee will look like moving forward. That'll either meet on a yearly or biannual basis, where you all will also be given the report card or whatever we decide to call it. I believe it's still going to be called a report card for how we're progressing towards zero fatalities and severe injuries by 2050. So this is the first meeting. We ended early. So I'm not sure if that means you all are tired of us or we did a good job this time. So any questions or anything between now and September? No? Okay. Well, I'm also tired of seeing you all too, so hopefully just one more time. Thank you, everyone.
Be safe.
Thank you guys so much.